Peace and clarity in nature. Lucy, you've introduced times to that, and I'll just ask everyone, please, if you would, and we'll get started. Okay. So, of all the people I know that have been a guest on Women to the Power of 10, Lucy, I think that finding peace and clarity in nature it's almost innate in you. And thank you for agreeing to come on today and share your experiences with us and inspire us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Harriet. It's my pleasure to see you guys again. Can you hear me okay? Great. Great. As you know, usually I'm outside and I can bellow all I want. So maybe just signal to Harriet if you can't, and you can interject, Harriet, if people can't hear. Yes, I'm not in my natural setting. This is my living room. Rarely am I in here in the day, but I did want to accept the chance to speak to you, even though we can't be together. And I do think this one we probably could have done at a distance, but this will be kind of like a little introduction and a little bit of homework for you to take away. So a lot of times I'm going to be talking about sit spots, which is a naturalist technique. It's not so formal as a technique, I don't suppose, but it's something that all cultures that have a deep natural connection, as well as individuals that you'll go with who seem to have this, back door into nature's secrets, we all do it. And probably lots of you did it as children. So first, as you know, I always like to honor the land, honor First Nations people, and honor our own ancestors and all the things they've brought to bear. In the news, there's so much more messaging currently right now for the trying losses acknowledged for Indigenous people. And I did want to just say that this extrapolates for me for the sense of how, as a First Nations person, one might realize how the connection to history is lost through lost ancestors, and many of them obviously children. And so I would encourage you, when you do your homework, do take a minute as well, if you feel like it's in your heart to do so, to feel that connection and the kinship with First Nations, and reaching out and a kinship to your own ancestors and their connection on the land. And this particular technique of the sit spot, when I go out and do a hike with gals like you, or with groups, no matter their age, usually there's a few keeners at the end who are like, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you know this stuff. You have an inner vision. You have, again, this backdoor view. And it isn't really so. That comes from being there. And for some people that feels really inaccessible, because not everyone is able to get to the bush and go, as you know, I do, like digging in the logs and peeking with magnifying glasses. I really get that isn't something that everyone wants to do, and not something that everyone can fit into their life for various reasons. But the true learning from nature actually is about observing. And it's not about finding something, naming it, understanding how it's useful to me, understanding how it's connected to me. That can be interesting and fascinating, and I love to know the names of things. But the true depth of understanding in nature is actually observing to the point where you feel included, where you understand that you are a part of nature, and where the rhythms of your breathing, your life, the living aspects of your body are actually part of nature. This is a meditative kind of thing. And I would encourage you that this can also be really rejuvenating. So if you're feeling tired of the world, you're feeling weary, you're feeling tried by all people who, like, one of the reasons I'm a naturalist, and I'm a friendly person, but people make me tired. They do. And not in a bad way. It's me. I I am tired by people. And so for me, nature is a nourishing place where I know that all those people I'm tired of are also part of it, and nature is also part of it. Um, so sit spots, they've been also kind of coined in the naturalist world by Tom Brown Jr., who's a forager, was a mentor for John Young, who has established naturalist training. I've never taken official naturalist training. I've seen some of the like workbooks and things like that, and I realized that I actually have done naturalist training through my life. I just didn't do it with the support of a school or a mentor. I just did it naturally and organically because of it's the natural path to follow to learning about nature. But they suggest that the sit spot I'm going to describe in a little bit is actually part of a core routine, just like you're doing core routines to maintain your flexibility, to maintain your mental acuity. Core routines to be at peace in nature, to be connected to nature, and to understand nature are fairly simple. They just require repetition and an openness. And you know, when you're stretching your hip flexor, you don't just kind of like flop it over. There is an intention there. There is an acknowledgement of that space and opening. And when we are connecting with nature, a lot of the time it's just very superficial and very superficial, as opposed to deeply concentrating on being present. And there are such large things to learn. Even Harriet, when you're talking about seeing that, so you spotted the mushroom. So there's one, you could be walking, you don't even notice the mushroom. You blast right by. You know you're on a power walk or something. The second degree of noticing would be that you notice it. You're like, mushroom, hey, I like mushrooms. You blast on by. A third degree would be in your case where you took the photograph and then had the further wish to understand more, which I would suggest is an even deeper dive. And then with more meditative sense, we can just start feeling the larger life of that mushroom, its larger connectivity. We could consider revisiting it if it's on a regular path, visiting it through its life cycle to see ourselves, where it ends up and how it deteriorates and what else grows from its remains, which is such a deep comfort to me, to know that I will, if I don't blast into space with a planetary explosion, I will get to decompose and nourish other things. And this is not a fear for me. It is a deep and abiding comfort. And I think as any of us age, it's many people describe aging into nature as being a primary comfort for them. Not that we can't get comfort from other people, I'm not suggesting that, but this is a fundamental part of our being that is unrelated to the expectation of humanity. We belong in nature, we will turn to nature. It's that dust to dust, ashes to ashes. I would say slimy, bloody, gooey mess to, you know, squishy, decayed plant material in the end. Again, for me, a comfort. So a sit spot itself is one spot that you choose for a deeper dive. And some people do this for years. John Young quite famously went to the same spot for 7 straight years every day. But many people who have a muse, like a poetic muse or a painting muse, do this naturally, and children do this all the time. You might remember doing this as a child, whipping down your backpack at the end of a school day or hanging it neatly, and then running out the door. And maybe there was just a hedge that you crawled into and snuggled in and just sat there, and you don't even know what you did now, like the hours just passed. Or you climbed into trees, or you lay in a field, or you just sat in your garden. Maybe you took your book to the garden. Maybe you still take your book to the garden. This is a sit spot technique. This is you reaching out to nature. This is you connecting with that, the wind, the patterning, the scents, the sounds that are out there. And we can expand on that as adults wanting to learn more about nature. So what the intent is that you choose this one spot, that it has one biome or community or ecological setting point, and that you just get to know it. You settle into it. You use it as a place of peace, and you also give it the attention it deserves, and you honor it by protecting it. It can be something that you visit in different times of day and in different weathers, and when you do so, you are recognizing those things.
Lucy, I'm wondering if someone I'm just curious to know if somebody has a space like that.
Yeah. So I was going to ask that. So can anybody think of something that it's hard for me I see you, Harriet, as big. So you spot who's raising their hand. Would anyone like to share a spot they go to regularly, maybe with their coffee, or maybe they go 5 minutes early for their morning walk? I see Jill with her hand up.
I happen to have a nice little wooden veranda in the front of my house with huge maple trees. And particularly on a sunny morning, I like to go out there, take my coffee, and just breathe in the world. There are birds, there are my favorite chipmunk and squirrel around. And I see people too, and I wave as they go by. But it's very peaceful for me to do that. Yes. It doesn't have to be very long.
Right. So you get your rejuvenation fairly rapidly from that connection. Anyone else? Dorothy?
It's making me sad because I had a spot like that and it was on my dock.
Right. Yeah, it's a really good point. So why don't you explain what you loved about it?
I loved it because it was quiet and there were birds and there were beautiful against the dock and the little boat, and
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can also sympathize with I've had life events as well that have removed my favorite sit spots through time, and it can, because you form that connection, like the fact that it makes you sad is a sign that it was a deep connection. I will say that it's worth, if that is something that you feel grievous about, it's worth trying to find one somewhere. And of course, like maybe you won't have the dock and the waves. Although I notice I walk in the mornings and there's a lot of people who just sit in their car looking at the lake. Now, some of them have a bong, but lots of them are just looking. And I think, I wish they'd open their windows and go sit by the water, because they are looking for that and reaching for that. And water is a natural attractant for that sense of meditation, isn't it?
And we should be able to find a spot like that in North Bay with 35 lakes and 72 parks. You know, it's possible.
It is possible.
But it was nice to go down with my coffee and just sit.
Yeah. Yep. And it doesn't have to be every day, but one of the main things about a sit spot is that it should be something that is fairly convenient to get to. So whenever you're drawn to get there, that you have the capacity to get there, that you're not relying on someone else taking you or a date that you've set, that you can be called to go and that you just go. But it doesn't have to be, I know John Young describes it as, it's not about a human perceived quality of space. It's about the quality of your attention. And I've had sit spots that were like the back of a baseball diamond. I live near the old rail line in the middle of downtown, and it is pretty scuzzy there. Like there are often needles and tent cities, and it also is like clinker, but you would be surprised. There's a little spot I just kind of sit, and there's a lot of nature, because that's actually a pathway between Laurier and some of the greenlands outside of the city. So finding a place where we're at the edge of something like water, a field, a road, anything like that. We actually have more diversity than if we were in the middle of like a big hardwood forest. So don't let it discourage you if you think you don't have the perfect place. I'm going to encourage you to try and just find a little spot that you would visit with fair frequency, It can be like, some ideas would be, a dock is a great idea, Dorothy, if you have access to one, or your back porch is a great one. In the corner, even if you just move your chair to, you have your deck and it faces your yard, maybe you move your chair right to the end of your yard, or you put a new one there, and you just take the time to walk that extra little distance to sit, and you might be surprised. And essentially, you just want to be, I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it. You want to be alone, you want to be still, and you want to be quiet. And when I say quiet, I mean it in the sense, so when I'm walking, I might have talked to you guys about this. When we're walking and we're hunting for stuff, I'm a predator. I'm out there stomping around and looking. If I'm actually tracking animals, or I do bird as well. And so if I'm birding, I walk like a deer. So a deer, instead of marching along like a wolf, walks in this tentative way you've watched many times. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3, pause. So that way, it's very interesting how it changes how everything in the forest hears me. And I do the same in my sit spot. So first I might arrive and I'm kind of blustered and flustered, and I sketch at my sit spot is something I enjoy, but I might be like flustering with my papers and things. And then I just have to take a minute, and I like to think of it as sitting like prey. So I sit as something that isn't looking to hunt. So when we want to be aware of everything, we don't want to have a hunter's intention or a hunter's awareness like that. What are you? I need to see you. I'm going to get you for my list. It has its place, but it doesn't have the sit spot mentality of being present as just a member who's observing. And so I'm going to encourage you, when you try your sit spot, to take into account this sense of like sitting still, not in an intent way, but sitting still in a relaxed way, where you're breathing with the wind that's there, where you're hearing things that are there, where you're hearing them, but you're kind of letting them along, like rush along you. I hope I'm describing this in a way that is attractive to you for your efforts, but it makes it very nice. So you want to be alone, you want to be still, and you want to be attentive. And I understand too that being in nature for some people, like especially if it's not just your backyard, alone is scary, or alone is unaccustomed. And so that's okay if any one of those things is not something that works for you right now. Go with a friend and then just sit some distance apart. Maybe you sit together for a bit and you chat with your coffee, and then, or a partner. Let's say you have coffee with your husband or something like that on your deck. And then, maybe he's puttering at the shed or whatever, and you go and you're a little further in than you would be comfortable, but you can hear your friend there. And that's okay too. Another advantage to having someone walk with you is that most animals don't have a complex understanding of numbers. And so this isn't true of every animal, but birds in particular, if you get walked somewhere and then that person walks on and you stay, a lot of the wildlife thinks that the humans have gone. We were a bulk entity and we've gone. Where if you are quiet and still, attentive, but absorbed, they don't recognize that you have stayed. It's a very good trick. And most people who have hides, they hide themselves. This is what they do. They'll get walked down, then they'll walk away, and things gear right back up because they think that the quote unquote danger, even though we were never in danger, is past, right? Let me just get myself into where I was. Another idea, besides being regular, and again, understanding that you may or may not be comfortable with this, is to establish, you can either do it as a routine, like maybe, I know Jill, you were saying like your coffee in the morning, and that's something you enjoy. For a naturalist perspective, seeing your sit spot at different times of the day is really advantageous. But that morning visit or an evening visit, it's good bang for your buck. In naturalist terms, that is called the crepuscular part of the day. So many of our wildlife are crepuscular. I love that word. It means that they like the hinge of the day. They like when it's either darkening or it's lightening, and the temperature is perfect, and their vision is established perfectly for that time of day. So you can see, you know, owls start coming out, nightjars, swallows, swifts, and then, you know, aside from birds, we can actually see a lot of plants close up, a lot of insects come out. We have the changeover from butterflies going to moths coming. And so because it's a changeover, just like being at the edge of a lake or the edge of a field, which has that diversity, we get a diverse sort of group of players that might come through our observation. And it's also, I think, for humans, a time, the very morning or the very evening, it's a time when we're shifting our outward feeling to inward feeling, or vice versa. We're either going to go face the world, or we're ready to retreat from it. And so the crepuscular times are kind of ideal times for sit spot. But don't let it discourage you. If you go for a run in the morning and you know, then you do your shopping, and then you have your lunch, and you have this soft period of time in the early afternoon where you normally maybe used to sunbathe or something like that, then I would suggest it's a good time for a sit spot. Why not?
Lucy,
Yeah.
we last fall we did a walk to High Lake, and there were, I don't know, I think there were about 20 of us. I'm not sure if those of you went, and we sat in silence for 20 minutes. And I was really curious, because you know how your thoughts run through your head.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can hear. And it was a large group, but it was just a kind of a silent meditation.
Yes.
And it was, and I know some of the members talk about this still.
Yeah.
Remembering that it was a very, very, what do you call it, landmark occasion.
Yeah, it's very moving.
It was very moving, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And what also happens, so it's interesting you mentioned that. So usually our vision, we start to be able to focus our vision first, humans, because we're very vision oriented. And then it takes us, as you say, some time to reach out with our ears. And you know, if you've been on hikes with me, you know that I always do this at the beginning of hikes. I get you to stretch your color palette. I get you to stretch your ears out. Well, your sit spot is a good time for that. And then there are these other awarenesses that we have. These are the ones that, like, I can't explain to someone on a hike. And many of you have probably experienced this, but when you're sitting and you do have established this connection, your understanding of what is out there becomes diversified. And it's a sort of a pattern recognition. You know, I recognize that my world, it has a lot of wildlife in it, even though I'm not always in the bush. It's because I know I've been around it and I know it's there. And I'm very sad for how many humans just never, ever make that connection. And so their life in it, when they're living their regular life, their pattern of what their human life is like, it doesn't include whales. It doesn't include whole oceans. It doesn't include whole forests. It doesn't include all the many trees, all of the mushrooms. How many people are like, yeah, I've seen a mushroom at the store. And so for me, it's a grievous feeling that people don't have a chance to make this connection, because when you're there, you don't have to know what you're hearing. You just have to hear that there's a lot. There's a lot there. And it's happening without you, and it's happening with you. You're a part of it, but it also would go, a tree does make a noise when it falls in the forest, whether you're there or not. And though I think that deep understanding is a huge part as well, that we have to change. We have to change for children, and we have to change for future generations if we're going to be protecting a diverse planet, because people they don't even imagine it. It isn't part of their recognition of what life incorporates. So if you say grocery store, there's an image in people's mind. If you say forest, there's an image in people's mind. And I would assert that when I say forest to most people, their image is very, very simplistic. It looks like a pine tree, an oak tree, some grassy stuff, and a little nest perched on a branch. And I, you know, I want all of us to have this very deep, indescribable sense that it's uncountable, that the interconnectedness is not something we have to understand to value, and that we can also get this deep nourishment. It's beyond our food that we get from nature. It's beyond the air that nature gives us. We are part of it, and we cannot live without it. And I know for my kids, like, they would not know this if, like, and I can't tell them. They have to be near nature to know, and they have to have time and peace to not be told what everything is, but just to dink around and to love it, to develop this passion themselves for it. But it doesn't have to be aggressive, is I guess the point of today's talk. It can be this very nice observational technique. So just regularly going alone to a spot where you are attentive and aware. So you can do some of those sensory exercises to expand your vision. Like, Jill, when, you know, there are birds, well, maybe you just take a moment to focus on that bird. And you know, the focus becomes part of those inquiry-based questions we've had on hikes before. So, you know, what is the bird doing? And then you know, you're there the next time and it's doing the same thing. And then the next time you go, it's doing something different. Well, what does that really say? And you don't have to be super intellectual about it, but these realizing that there are patterns in nature is really, really great. It's really great. And you get to see real treasures. So, you know, if you have birds there, you have chicks there. If you have birds that are acting weird right now, I could bet that most of them are fledgling chicks. So they're just trying to get out of the nest. They're trying to avoid cats. they're hopping around. And if you look, you'll see the parents talking to them. And the language that the parents are using is different from the calls that they use to attract a mate. It's different from the call that they'll give to tell their little chick that you're a danger. So you have to be there. You have to wait until they're comfortable and like long enough. Say usually a sit spot is at least 15 minutes long. It doesn't have to be hours. And you can drink your coffee while you're doing it, or like me, you can sketch or write while you're doing it. So you just want it to be to the point where nature turns itself back on to its regular activity. And then you'll start absorbing all of this messaging that's happening and you'll become part of it. You can question things. Like, I'm a questioner, I'm very curious, but I try in my sit spot to like ask, the question comes up no matter what, like, you know, what is that bird doing? And I try and kind of ask the question, and then I try and kind of let it go and continue my observation. And later on, or I might even write it, but later on, I can always ask that question again. But this is a time to be open to all of the things that are out there. Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can learn from it. Now, Harriet and I had talked about actually having an exercise where you would go just now to a sit spot and take a few minutes and then come back, which we can do if you'd like to do that. Otherwise, we could also just, you know, because it is hard to get enough time in that you have the observation and you get there. And I know you've just exercised, so you might want to, I don't know, change your shirt, whatever. All those things take time. So we could also just kind of go around the circle and either talk about a sit spot you have, or I was kind of thinking that people might just have a natural observation that they'd like to share. You know, my friends and I call it a coup, like when you see something kind of really super in nature that gives you that shivery feeling, or maybe it's just a beautiful thing that you've observed. Can I have a sense of your preference?
I'd like to talk, go around the circle and talk. Yeah. I'm interested to hear other people's things.
Yeah, I am too.
Okay. Well, why don't we do that? And Harriet, if you've got your roster there, you can see them in order. Why don't you do that?
Sure. Well, we'll start with Well, Dorothy, do you want to unmute?
Well, I mentioned my dock, but now my deck, I love it. It's lovely and comfortable, but we have a lot of neighbors who are hammering and sawing and mowing the lawn, and so I have to find a new spot.
Have you been anywhere recently, actually, Dorothy, where you saw a little sign of spring or summer that really made you feel good?
Oh yeah. We have our trailer set up in my son's farmyard. He
Right.
has and we go there all the time. And yeah, now that I think of it, I do have a nice spot.
And what have you been noticing out there most recently?
I was there on Saturday and I was looking at the most beautiful, big, perfect tree, maple tree. It was just, and I thought, it's so huge and beautiful. And Jamie didn't have to plant it. It's just there.
Yes.
So I guess I do have a spot. I've just never not had a dock for 50 years.
Right. Yeah, that can be hard, eh?
Yeah, so, but we have our pontoon boat. We're good. Yeah, I'm not so sad after all.
I'm remembering I have a favorite sit spot when I was 13. And it was at Lions Beach, which it's not called that anymore. It's Kinsman Beach. And I would climb this tree. I just moved from Sudbury, was still black rocks then, you know. And I thought I died and went to heaven because I was a block away from Lake Nipissing. So I would climb that tree all by myself. I had no friends yet in North Bay. And I would just sit there for hours on end. And I wonder, I go down and I could never climb up to that top, that branch now. But it just, I fell in love with North Bay then. It's a lovely.
Yeah, well, and that's probably how you described it. I would assert that you fell in love with your sense of place and like you felt comfortable in yourself and where you were, which is a nature feeling.
Well, you help at this time in my life. You're helping me along there, Lucy, to be more connected to nature for sure. Jill.
I remember as a young child, I mean, some of you know I was raised in England, and we had a small backyard, but with high stone walls. That was just the way life was at that point. And I was an only child, and I had lots of friends, but I also had time when I was very much by myself. And I would go out in the garden, and it could be any time of day, and the sun would be shining. And I'd just lie on my back on the grass, staring up and watching the clouds go by. And my imagination would just sort of run wild in terms of, and I know we've all done this as kids, you know, the shapes that you see, an elephant here, a dog there, or whatever. And I became very aware of differences in clouds, you know, the darker clouds, the cumulus clouds, and that kind of a thing. And I'd see birds flying across my vision as I was staring up at the sky. And I remember that quite fondly, and sometimes think, gee, I'd really like to do that again. I don't know what my neighbors would say if they saw me flat in the back staring at the sky. They might be a bit worried about me, but that was always a warm, good feeling to me. That's it.
Yes, so it's a very nice story, Jill. And I think it's really interesting because we all take comfort in our adulthood in things that were, I think, supportive in our childhood. My kids always joke because if I'm flustered, I'll be like, I just have to get to trees. And my mom, I'm British by birth, and my family in England, my mom, very British in her parenting. And I was a noisy baby. I was colicky and cantankerous. And she put me in the pram and pushed me to the back of we lived in a little village. She'd push me to the back under the cherry tree and leave me till I stopped crying. And which, whatever, I was safe, I was fine. And I think, I always laugh and think that that's why when I'm at my most agitated, I love to just literally, my kids laugh about it, just being under the trees, I feel like I can get a grip. And in your case, an open sky sounds like that really gives you a sense of your place. And Harriet's might be up the tree. Which is my second daughter. When she's frustrated, and in fact, we live, as I say, right downtown. She knows every climbing tree on public property because her best thing is to get up high, snuggled in with branches around. It's interesting how it carries forward. And I think it's really good for us and nourishing as women that we recognize that we're calling on ancient skill, and we're calling on our personal deep skill to be able to self-comfort and to be able to find ourselves when we can call on that. So I don't know if you have to lie flat, but you could get a reclining cot.
You're gonna ask Linda to unmute. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay. I was listening to your bird story about the birds. When I first moved here, I was convinced there was hummingbirds here. Never saw one. So I put out a feeder and finally one came one day. And now, probably 10 years we've been here, we have families every year. And I can follow them in the trees now. I see them before they even come. I can spot them. And they're so tiny, but everywhere I go now, I seem to be able to see them for some reason. It's kind of bizarre. So that's kind of my story. And Jill, I think you should go out this afternoon and do that. Look at the clouds.
It's I love that story too, actually, Linda, because that emphasizes sort of the academic side of that patterning piece. So a lot of times someone will come to me, especially about mushrooms, but they'll be like, there have never been this many mushrooms. Like, they're sure of it. Or the geese have never been to my cottage. And I don't want to say it's not true, but it's probably not true. It's probable that they're, sorry, you know what? I'm just going to wait. My neighbor's whippersnipping. I'll close the window.
Funny, I see everybody smiling when you hear these stories. You notice that?
There we go. Sorry. Yes, so this idea that you knew in your heart that they were there, and then now your patterning is so astute. That's like, I know when I'm out and I spot mushrooms, I'm like, well, I can't not see them, right? And in your case, you can't not see hummingbirds because you have patterned them there. And that's what I mean about this deep sense of what is out there and what is possible in nature. So your paradigm in life includes hummingbirds. And if you were to make a list of things that are valuable in your world, it would probably include hummingbirds on the list. And some people, it would never cross their mind. It would never, they actually don't even know about hummingbirds.
Next we have Lindsay.
Oh, hi. I was just listening and thinking, and I think my sit spots have evolved over the years. I was thinking when I was a child, we lived beside a railroad track, and there was all this brush between the house and the track, and we made this fort. And that's where I would go. It was all made out of twigs. And that was kind of my safe spot there. And then as I grew up and we moved on, it all seems to be related to trees. When I was living in the Midwest in the States, there were big trees, and I would go out and sit underneath the trees as I didn't know anybody there. And it was just like leaning against the bark of the tree. We just seemed to share a connection with the tree. And now that I'm in North Bay, I think many people have seen this wonderful big old oak tree that is back on my trails near the La Vaz River. And it's huge. and it's got great big branches that are hanging down. And to me, it's like a warm embrace. When I go underneath this tree, I think, and I can look at the Lavaz River, and I see the ducks and lots of herons right now, and I've seen the beavers and they're moving down, but I just feel this warm, comfortable embrace of being in this place and just having to do nothing but look around.
Okay, Gwen.
I'm like Dorothy, and I used to have a dog and I loved it. And I used to go down every morning with my coffee at sunrise and just see everything. But the one thing that really I'll never forget was we were down at the dock and it was evening and we had a glass of wine and we were just quiet. And a little beaver, a little girl beaver, swam by. And shortly after, we imagined it was a little boy beaver, swam after her, and there was a big, and the little guy came back, and then he waited a little bit longer and he went back towards her, and there was a little blah, 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 and smack. And that went on for about 10 minutes that she kept saying, go away. And I really don't think that if, we would have noticed that if we hadn't been just quiet and watching. It was fascinating. I don't know if she ever really won or, it's come here, get away. I'm not really sure.
Oh, man. Maureen. Unmute, please.
No, I didn't say anything. I was laughing.
Oh, do you have a sit spot?
Well, no, I sit in my yard. We live up by the airport, lots of trees all over the place. It's a good place to sit. I sit in my gazebo but I'm thinking when I hear this, we own the property next door. I could go and sit there in the trees. And I think I'm going to.
Nice. Sue Campbell. Sue's not there. Noreen.
Hi. After lunch, I usually take my cup of tea and I sit on my balcony and I just sort of close my eyes and just think of the morning and what I'm going to plan in the afternoon. But it's really comforting just to sit there. But in my younger days, growing up, in our yard, there was a swing, and my mom said I would just swing for hours and hours. And as I grew teenage, I still was on that swing. And later in life, you have the swings the rocking swings, and I just love to swing. But, and when I'm walking up on Ski Club, there's a little area with trees and a stream. And a lot of times when I'm walking by myself, I will just stop and stand and just admire and hear the water and admire the trees. So nature is always I love nature. So, and I love being outside. Yeah.
Thanks, Noreen. Pam.
Hi. I usually sit on the back deck and I love to sit out there and have my coffee. And lately we have a robin that's nested right underneath the deck, which is really nice. But when she doesn't really like us out there and she makes a big fuss and squawks when we're around because I think we're going to hurt her babies. But it's really relaxing to be out there and listen. And we have a big maple tree that is right near our deck. So it's really great. And I also connect with water quite a bit because my parents had a cottage on Maquabi Lake and I had one there earlier in my life too. And I used to love to sit on the dock and look at all the different wildlife that was around and all the different trees. It was very peaceful and me.
Thanks, Pam. Marianne?
I have a patio in front of the house with a huge tree, and on that we have a bird feeder. And I just love to sit out there and watch the birds, all year round. It's just really peaceful And most of my neighbors, although I live close to the lake, have cottages. So it's very quiet and very peaceful. And that's my sanctuary.
Nice. Connie.
Did you say me?
Yes, I said Connie. Sorry, Bonnie.
Oh,
Connie,
okay.
Bonnie. Connie.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Sorry, Bonnie, Connie's next. Could you just?
okay, that's
After Connie. Okay, go ahead, Connie.
Yes, I have two verandas that I really like sitting on. The backyard where there's my garden and I watch that. And the front yard, I can see the sunsets from on Lake Nipissing. So I really enjoy that. But what I do remember is when the boys were small, going to the cottage, and they talk about the docks. I remember my mother-in-law taking my 2-month-old son to the end of the dock and just standing there rocking him. It was so pretty to see. And now I got a picture of my granddaughter on the same dock in the sunset, and there's a duck further down and she's waving at the duck. So that's
nice.
Anyway.
Bonnie.
okay. So I certainly my place has always been at the cottage, which I have till next Thursday. But yeah, sitting our deck is like it's like a tree house because the trees are so tall and our deck is out under the trees. It never gets hot there. It's always shaded. And I think especially for Doug and I, that has been a special spot to sit there and sit on the dock because we'll sit for hours with each other and we can be quiet together or we can talk together. So that's always been special. Now, since we've been walking this winter so much, I have just really appreciated walking under the, the dappled sun through the trees. And so I've now spent a lot more time in my backyard, which doesn't have quite the dappling, but there is a bit of serenity there. So I'm sort of still searching, trying to find where my spot will be.
Thanks, Bonnie. Jeez. Oh, Lucy, you're next.
I feel like I've told lots of stories about mine. What I would suggest, so I know we're getting close to time, right, Harriet?
Yeah, we've got a few more to go.
Yeah, we could let other people have a turn.
Okay. Linda, can you unmute?
I like walking by Chippewa Creek. If I go down if I go down by the school, there's a nice trail along there and woods by the creek. And I find it really quiet. You go along and you can sit on a rock down there and just see the creek going along and a few birds and I like it.
Rosemary.
I have a Muskoka chair at the bottom of my deck that overlooks my garden. And I have a pond, so it has a water fountain so I can hear the water. See all the birds and the chipmunks coming to get a drink out of my pond. I can watch the butterflies. That's my spot. It's underneath a big tree.
Janet Comerford. She's not there. Debbie.
Yeah, thanks. I'm so enjoying this because now I'm going to picture all of you in your spots. I love this. Same thing, as a kid, I've always been a water person, drawn to water, but I also spent an awful lot of time sitting in trees as well. We used to live out at the lake, and I certainly had a spot between two very, very gigantic pine trees that I put a hammock on, and it was right down by the water as well. And that was certainly a very special spot to me. But here in the city, we're very fortunate that our property backs onto a big green space, and the trees back there are magnificent. There's you know, typical neighborhood noise, but I can still find an awful lot of peace just sitting either on my deck or in my yard. And you know, I also, we have a sunroom, which is what I'm sitting in right now, that looks out on all of that. And I've got all the doors and windows open, and so I can hear the birds, and I can see everything that I would see if I was sitting outside. So maybe your sit spot can be indoors, but kind of connected to the outdoors. But I am definitely, when I really need some solace, I go to the water. I go down to the water.
Thanks, Debbie. Joan Clark? There's a black screen, so I don't know. iPad? There's no name on there, so Heather? That's it?
Yes. It's Heather.
What is Heather? Okay, there she is. Okay. Yeah, where's your sit spot?
Well, I have been for many years a lover of the view of Lake Nipissing from its shoreline. I grew up in Toronto, and we would take the train up every summer to visit my grandparents and rent a cottage on the lake, and it's been my addiction. I love to go walking with my friends, or I will go alone, and along the waterfront to be able to see 180 degrees, see the island, see the sunrise or set or wherever it is, and watch the sparkle on the water of the waves if the sun is clear, and the clouds. And we're just so very fortunate to live here.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. Thanks, Heather. Okay, Lucy, do you want to wrap it up?
Sure. Yes. What a pleasure to hear everybody's sit spots and your sort of eco memories. And I can tell I've been preaching to the choir about taking solace from nature. I would encourage you. One of the messages that I did want to share is that I feel like anyone older than me, say I just turned 44 this past week. Anyone older than me, I would say, has had the sort of chance to have a lot more uninterrupted and less complex, I would assert, time to themselves. And I would encourage you to support friends, and specifically younger people, children, millennials, who have clearly maybe not found a place of solace or a thing of solace, because a lot of people are turning to unhealthy actions, whether it's, 20 hours of Netflix, whether it's chemical addiction, whether it's just overeating or things like that. They are turning to solace that isn't good for them. And I do feel like the reason is partly because they haven't had enough exposure to this piece. And the trick is that we can't teach someone to feel that. And with children, like we don't have to give them all kinds of activities and tools. They just need to be given the free rein to find their own little spot, within sight or whatever. And the hearing their stories when they come back, asking them how did it make you feel? How did you have a good time? What did you see out there? Isn't it nice under the trees? Those very simple questions. Or with friends who are really agitated or have changes of life. Clearly, some of you are having changes of place. And maybe one of the comforts that could be offered to each other is those gentle conversations about, what have you seen at your new place? Have you got any great trees nearby? Because that shift in perspective is very hard with life changes for young and old. But I do feel like there's comfort to be had. So thank you for listening to me about the sit spot today.
Lucy, listen, thank you. This is
welcome.
Amazing. This is one of my favorite times because when we can share as a group, I learn so much from everybody. It's awesome. And I would like to say that over the winter, the fall and winter and spring, our adventures have, I think, deepened our connection to nature, you know, and I'm very grateful for that. I guess again, a gift of COVID, I think. I don't know. That's
Well,
what
can I say, Harriet, that I always feel like your women and all you women out there, when I talk about you, when I go to other groups, and I often say, I know this group of women, they are intelligent, they've had professional lives and interesting lives. And now to be invited, like, to talk about something like nature and realizing how much, like, I feel like has been probably a feedback in your lives, this broader view that comes from having exposure to some of these things in your earlier years too, you know?
Well, thank you. And
we'll see you in the fall.
Yeah, for